I'm a huge Prince fan. I actually had the opportunity of meeting him when I was a nightclub promoter at Fluid Lounge here in Toronto when he lived in Toronto on Bridle Path. And then I've obviously been to a couple of his concerts, but recently I actually had the opportunity of going to Paisley Park. And there was a part of the tour, I'm not sure if you've taken the tour, but where you get to hear When Doves Cry the way he wanted to hear it, but it wasn't released to the public is how they explained it to us. I guess my question to you is, if you could describe into words, because I've tried to describe this feeling to others, like certain songs that you might have heard in a recording studio space versus sort of on a CD or a vinyl. Like, can you explain into words like certain songs you might have heard in a studio space and like the feeling you get in a studio of hearing his music?
Well, that's a great question, but first I want to ask you about something you just said. You said of Doves Cry that it was a version that he didn't want people to hear. Is that what you said? Or it was a version that he wanted and didn't release? Was that it? Did it have heavy distorted guitar on it? Was it more like a rock song?
Yeah, to clarify again, I'm just going by what the tour guide told me, so I apologize if I'm wrong on this, but basically we got brought to a room in Paisley Park right by the studio, and then they said, you're going to hear a version of When Doves Cry that has not been released to the public. And they played, yeah, to your point, I think it was a little bit distorted, but it gave us all goosebumps, and we even begged them to play it a couple more times. And it just got me to thinking, is there versions of certain songs you heard that maybe the public hasn't heard? And just describe that feeling of hearing a song, I guess, more so in a recording studio versus on a record, so to speak.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just returned from Paisley Park this weekend. I know the version you're talking about. The original version of When Doves Cry was pretty heavy, with heavy distorted guitar, and it was just this big thunderous thing because Prince originally conceived of it as kind of as a rock song, similar to Purple Rain with a big guitar. And then he realized, wisely, this isn't going to work. The tagline of the chorus is, "This is what it sounds like when doves cry," which doesn't sound like big, heavy guitars belong there. So he totally stripped it back. He reapproached it and cleaned it up a lot and made it a rhythmic vehicle that left plenty of room for the lyrics and the vocal part, and made it sound gentler and more like doves. He even realized, because he made it so rhythmic, that he could just take out the bass entirely. He didn't need it. He had all the harmony, all the melody, all the rhythm that he needed in the version that we hear on record. So it was just changing his mind artistically as he went through the process. To actually hear music in the studio is quite thrilling because, at least with Prince anyway, you crank up the volume and all the walls are just thundering, and it's everything you hear can sound like this is the greatest thing ever. This is the greatest record that's ever been. But most people aren't going to get the excitement of these big giant monitors. So you have to force yourself to forego that excitement and actually do the final mixing, listening moderately loudly on, smaller bookshelf speakers. You have to try to push excitement into a record when it's coming from a small space at a moderate volume. So yeah, we get to stand in the studio and crank up the volume. We also get to hear the versions of songs that don't make it out the door. Versions of you should have heard You Got the Look. When it was one time it was much slower in tempo, and then he realized, no, that won't work, and he sped it up. But hearing it go through its iterations allows you to hear the mind of the record maker and understand their decision-making process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have one. Hi.